Hello, welcome to another Help for Homeowners webinar session. I'm Samuel Keen, and I'm the Senior Foreclosure Prevention Counselor for the Foreclosure Prevention Unit with the County of Los Angeles Department of Consumer and Business Affairs. This week, we will be discussing the California Foreclosure Process as well as foreclosure prevention protection. Next slide. Now, the mission of the County of Los Angeles Department of Consumer and Business Affairs is written here to promote a fair and vibrant marketplace. We serve consumers, businesses, and communities through education, advocacy, and complaint resolution. Since the onset of the pandemic, millions of Americans have been able to suspend mortgage payments through the CARES Forbearance Plan. The Federal Housing Agency, along with the FHA, the VA, and the USDA continue to extend their moratorium on foreclosures and evictions over the year, and the protections are set to expire and have expired on July 31st. Homeowners who currently have a forbearance plan will continue to forbear payments until the end of that term of the forbearance plan. However, others may have to explore what's called post-forbearance options offered by their lender or their servicer. Now, navigating this process during a time of crisis can be a daunting task. The Department of Consumer and Business Affairs, along with other local housing counseling agencies, are working to proactively outreach and inform homeowners about available resources and where they can go to receive legitimate help. Now, today, the two foreclosure prevention helpers, or experts actually, are going to be myself and my colleague, Ani Davshin. We're going to go over, like mentioned before, the California Foreclosure Process and the options when it comes to facing a foreclosure. On top of that, where a property owner may look to receive free and reliable help. Next slide. Now, before we actually begin, I'd like to just mention we will actually be using or requesting that participants use or mute their mics and use the chat box to submit any questions that they may have. We will be answering questions at the end of the presentation, so let's begin. Now, what is foreclosure? Now, in California, the foreclosure process is very simple. However, for whatever reason, there's a lot of confusion around it. Foreclosure, in fact, by definition, is the legal process used by lenders to recover the balance of a loan when a property owner fails to meet any obligation of the loan. Now, most frequently, that obligation is the lack of payment. Next slide. Now, in California, two types of foreclosures can in fact occur. There is what's called a judicial foreclosure, which is not as frequent, and a non-judicial foreclosure. Now, a judicial foreclosure will typically involve what's called a mortgage. Now, that's a technical term that is used in this type of deal. A mortgage involves two parties, which would be the borrower and a lender. The lender is essentially, if they're going to recover any amount of money that they're owed when the borrower fails to meet the obligation of the loan, they would have to sue the borrower in court in order to begin the foreclosure process. Now, a non-judicial foreclosure is going to involve what's called a deed of trust. Now, a deed of trust is going to involve a borrower, a lender, and a third party called a trustee. Now, the borrower, in fact, would convey the power to sell to the trustee. Now, the borrower would essentially let the trustee know, if I default on any obligation of my loan, I give you the power to sell the property or the property to recover the cost of what I had borrowed to the lender, or to essentially initiate the foreclosure proceedings. Now, the foreclosure trustee will conduct a public auction, and it does not require a court proceeding. Now, in California, both of these foreclosures can take place, but most typically it's going to be a non-judicial state. Next slide. Now, this is sort of a small outline of what the California foreclosure process looks like. It's going to begin with, when the foreclosure process starts, like I had mentioned before, it's a process. It's going to begin with what's called a notice of default. Now, the notice of default is the start of the foreclosure. It's the initial notice that's recorded with the county recorder's office that lets the world know and the recorder's office know that the borrower has essentially failed to meet the terms of their loan, and they're going to begin to move forward with collecting on the obligations or the debt. 90 days from there, a notice of trustee sale will be recorded. Now, a notice of trustee sale is going to be the document that says essentially in no less than 20 days, we will sell the property at auction to recover the debt that's owed to the investors. Okay. Now, when it does get to the auction, if it gets there, four options really are going to sort of come up. The first one would be the auction is postponed, meaning maybe the borrower has come to terms with the lender, maybe they've come up with some sort of workout option, or maybe they're beginning to look at a workout option, and they're going to move the auction sale date forward in the future. The property can essentially, when it goes to the auction, maybe nobody does in fact bid on the property, and it's going to be returned to the lender, meaning it's going to be a REO or a real estate owned property. The property can actually sell to a third party. Somebody bids on it, maybe there's a bidding war, maybe there's not. And that new person or that party would be granted the title to the property. The auction can at another point be canceled. It's possible that maybe the owner had come to a permanent foreclosure prevention option, and they're moving forward with owning the property, or maybe they've sold it, so the auction is just permanently canceled. Now, with the middle option, sold to the bank, REO, like we mentioned, or maybe sold to a third party, a trustee's deed upon sale document will be recorded. Now, this document, in fact, will transfer the property to the winning bidder at the auction, and it's going to outline the amount that the property was sold for, who the property was given to, and the date, which can be important as people move forward. Next slide. Now, going back, the notice of default is going to have a couple of different steps and a couple of things that are sort of important to look at. Now, the notice of default will be required by the lender, again, as the borrower fails to meet the terms of their loan. Most frequently, it's missing payments. It can sometimes be other things where maybe the property is not occupied by the lender, or by the property owner, and the lender requires it, things like that. Again, it's important to understand this is in fact the start of the foreclosure process. And at this point, it's highly recommended that somebody would apply for foreclosure prevention options. And we'll get into that in a second. Next slide. It may be difficult to see here, but this is a very common form that's used when a notice of default is recorded. It's going to say notice of default, typically an election to sell under deed of trust. That's the document that's used to begin the process. It's recorded with the county. In LA County, property owners are required to receive this by mail. It's going to show the address, the amount that's due. The property owner is going to have some pretty critical information that if you receive that, you're going to want to make sure to look over. Okay, next slide. Now, the notice of sale, the notice of trustee sale is a document that the lender is going to record, as I mentioned before, approximately 3 months after the notice of default. Now, I say approximately because 3 months are required to go by before the lender can actually move forward. The lender doesn't always move forward after the 3 months or the 90 days, but that is the minimum amount of time required. Now, this document will in fact actually set the auction date. It'll give you not only the auction date, but the time. It's going to give you the location, and it's going to give you the minimum bid to begin the auction. Now, again, even though it is very close to the auction date, it is always recommended that a property owner, if they're looking to apply for foreclosure prevention options, that they do so. Because even though they're limited just because of the time issue, you never know. It's something that at least is worth exploring. Okay, next slide. Now, this is a copy of a typical notice of trustee sale. Again, it's going to show the most important things there, the borrower, the minimum bid, and also what's called the trustee sales line and a trustee sales case number. Anybody who finds this document, looks for it, comes across it, can call that number and can ask, what the actual auction date is set for. and when it's going to be, or not only when it's going to be, but where it will be. And they're required to provide the most up-to-date information that they have. Well, next slide. Now, the trustee's deed upon sale is the next document, if the auction does go through, that will be recorded. Now, this document does in fact transfer the property over to the winning bidder. By default, this will be the lender if there's no bid larger than the lender's opening bid. So if nobody were to bid on the lender's request, it's going to go back onto their books. It's going to be what's called a real estate owned property. At this time, we would strongly recommend that you reach out to either our office or a HUD approved agency to discuss, what your options are moving forward, which usually in that time are extremely limited. But like I said, every situation is different, and you would want to talk to somebody who knows, who's familiar with the subject. Next slide. Now, this is a copy of the trustee's deed upon sale that are a typical trustee deed upon sale document that's recorded. It's going to show the amount that was paid, or the amount that was asked for, the amount that was paid, the new lender. It's going to show a date, a time, when it was bid for, all things that are going to be important if you're sort of put in that situation and you need to figure out who needs to be contacted to discuss your options moving forward. Next slide. Now, after foreclosure, a notice of vacate is going to be typically handed over by the new property owner. Now, if the property is actually occupied by the previous owner, technically that person will only be required to receive what's called a 3-day notice to vacate. Meaning in 3 days, if you do not exit the property, I will begin the eviction process with the courts. Okay. Now, tenants potentially may receive a longer notice before eviction, depending on the validity of their tenancy. And that there's so many different things that go into that. Now, typically, whether it's a tenant or a property owner, a cash for keys negotiation was actually made popular recently, where the person occupying the property would reach out to the new owner and say, listen, I understand you own the property now. What is it that we can do? Can we come to some sort of agreement where, maybe you give me a little bit of time or maybe a little bit of money, and I'll just pick up and leave. We can avoid the eviction process. That is another opportunity for you to explore, and that is something that our department does help individuals explore when they're faced with this situation. Next slide. Now, the homeowner notification program, I wanted to touch on this really quick. It was established in 1996 in order to alert homeowners of newly reported documents. Now, this applies to grant deeds, quitclaim deeds, and deeds of trust. These documents were required to be mailed to property owners within 30 days of the recording of those documents. And it was essentially meant to provide information and counseling and assistance to property owners who were maybe unaware that this stuff had happened. Now, the purpose behind it were grant deeds and quitclaim deeds have to do with changes in title. So if somebody was essentially maybe scammed out of their property, or maybe they had, maybe changes were made without their knowledge, a copy of that document would be sent to you for you to realize and do something proactively about the change and figure out how to move forward. Now, a deed of trust, again, is going to be the document that's used to take a loan out. And if a property owner was unaware that a loan was either, recorded against their property or maybe incorrectly recorded against their property, they would be notified that this has happened and they could do something about it before, things get bad. Next slide. Now, the enhanced homeowner notification program began with Senate Bill 62, and it expanded the homeowner notification program to include 2 additional documents. Now, like I had mentioned before, the grant deed and the quitclaim deed and a deed of trust, all of those documents would be sent to the property owner, to the property, and any other mailing address involved. Now, in addition to that, the notice of default and the notice of trustee sale would be included. So if a property owner was in fact facing foreclosure, they would be notified in the same fashion as if somebody had removed them from title, or there's a title change, or if a loan was taken out. Now, Senate Bill 827 reduced the time that the county was required to mail a notice from 20 days down to 14 days. Now, this is really an effort to make sure that the proper parties are notified before maybe some other bad actors got involved. AB 1106 actually extended the program to make sure that property owners in the County of Los Angeles would continue to be notified that these documents were recorded for an additional 10 years. Next slide. Now, the County of Los Angeles Foreclosure Prevention Unit provides, just like the slide says, foreclosure prevention services. The Foreclosure Prevention Unit's main goal is to assist homeowners in preventing or avoiding foreclosure of their property. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean keeping the property, but it does, in fact, mean that every situation is different. And when we get these cases, it doesn't, there's no blanket statement that any of us can give to every property owner in the county, which is why individual attention with an assigned counselor is something that we pride ourselves on. If a request for assistance is made with our office, the goal here is to open a dialogue with the lender to explore foreclosure prevention alternatives. Essentially, our office is looking to connect the property owner with their lender and figure out what, in fact, options might be available to them to avoid foreclosure. It may not always include retention, but it may require, or it may provide a more graceful exit should keeping the property be impossible. Next slide. So moving forward, I'm going to go ahead and hand off the presentation to my colleague. Her name is Ani Dafshin, and she is a counselor with the Foreclosure Prevention Unit. Ani, go ahead.
Thank you, Sam. So today I will start by discussing the CARES Act. Under the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, otherwise known as the CARES Act, servicers are required to grant a forbearance to all borrowers with federally backed loans if they are experiencing a financial hardship due to the COVID-19 national emergency. Hardships during this time can include, but are not limited to, unemployment, reduction in regular work hours, causing lower income, or the illness of a borrower, co-borrower, or dependent family member. No documentation of hardship is required when applying for aid under the CARES Act. Next slide, please. All borrowers with federally backed loans that are current or less than 30 days delinquent will be automatically granted up to 6 months of an initial forbearance. In general, servicers are offering were offering forbearance plans in 3-month increments, and borrowers can receive extensions of up to 12 months in increments, meaning a total borrowers can receive an 18-month forbearance plan. The post-forbearance options will be different if a borrower was more than 30 days delinquent before the COVID-19 hardship period. Mortgage forbearance terms will depend on the type of loan the owner or investor requires in your mortgage loan, and it is important to contact your servicer directly to discuss your situation. The Department of Consumer and Business Affairs Foreclosure Prevention Unit can assist you in getting in touch with your lender or servicer to discuss further options. Next slide, please. The foreclosure moratorium had been extended 1 month from June 30, 2021 to the end of July, and as of today, there is no extension. Property owners will need assistance now that the moratorium has expired, as it may be difficult to contact their lender. Foreclosures now can legally proceed, and property owners may not have the funds necessary to become current. During this vulnerable time, property owners should be aware of scammers. You may be approached by individuals or companies that guarantee that they can stop your foreclosure. However, foreclosure prevention cannot be guaranteed by anyone but your lender or servicer. It is best to contact them directly to find out if they will continue the foreclosure process or if it has been stopped. Next slide, please. So AB 3088 is a fairly new law that took effect on September 1, 2020. providing additional protections to certain renters, small landlords, and some homeowners who are unable to pay their rent or mortgage after being negatively affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide, please. Prior to AB 3088, mortgages that were not federally backed were not required to provide assistance to property owners who were experiencing a financial hardship due to the COVID-19 pandemic, as only federally backed mortgages were covered under the CARES Act. This bill outlines how lenders are going to respond to a request for assistance concerning borrowers or property owners negatively affected by this ongoing crisis. Next slide, please. AB 3088 applies to first liens and a forbearance review is required. The homeowner had to be current on their mortgage as of February 1, 2020 in order to qualify. And unlike the CARES Act, homeowners are required to provide proof of financial hardship due to COVID-19. If the borrower does not qualify, the lender must specify the reason for disqualification, and the decision must come from the lender within 21 days. They must include specific ways to amend the request for the forbearance. Next slide, please. So if their forbearance request is denied, homeowners also have the right to appeal the lender's decision. If they choose to appeal, the lender must provide a response within 5 days of the appeal. If the forbearance is accepted, however, the lender must reach out to the homeowner prior to the end of their forbearance plan and let them know what options they have after the forbearance is over. Governor Gavin Newsom signed AB 832, which extended the effective time period for non-federal backed mortgages to provide written notice of if a forbearance was denied, and it must state the steps necessary to cure this defect. The provision was originally set to expire in September of 2021. However, with AB 832, it has now been extended up until the end of the year. Next slide, please. On April 12, 2021, the Department of Consumer and Business Affairs partnered with the Neighborhood Housing Services of Los Angeles County, also known as NHSLA, to assist homeowners with the Los Angeles County Mortgage Relief Fund. NHSLA and its network of counselors alongside the Department of Consumer and Business Affairs will also provide foreclosure prevention counseling services to property owners of the Los Angeles County. Eligible property owners may qualify for up to $20,000 to pay for their missed mortgage payments. Next slide, please. To be considered for the Los Angeles County Mortgage Relief Fund, you must meet the following criteria. Your property must be owner-occupied, meaning you're living on that property, and it should be located within the County of Los Angeles. Property owners must demonstrate a COVID-19 related hardship, and Los Angeles County property owners with 1 unit and a loan balance of up to $726,522, or county property owners with 2 to 4 units with a loan balance of up to $1 million may qualify. Because each homeowner's individual situation is so different, we recommend you call the Neighborhood Housing Services or apply online to further discuss qualifying for this financial assistance. Next slide, please. If you would like to contact the Neighborhood Housing Services of Los Angeles County, you may do so at their phone number or visit them on their website for more information or to apply for the Los Angeles County Mortgage Relief Fund. Next slide, please. The California Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency has rent relief options for both landlords and renters in the state of California. So this program is not specific to Los Angeles County, and any California landlord or tenant may apply. Landlords who have 1 or more eligible renters can apply to get reimbursement for up to 100% as of June 28, 2021. And each of their tenants' unpaid rent will be reimbursed for the time period between April 1, 2020 and August 31, 2021. Requirements include, but are not limited to, all payments received being used to satisfy the renter's unpaid rent for this period, and renters must take the steps to verify that they meet the eligibility requirements and sign the application prior to receiving any funds. Next slide, please. The California Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency will also assist eligible renters if they have qualified for unemployment benefits or experienced a reduction in household income, incurred significant costs, or experienced other financial hardships due to COVID-19, and or demonstrate a risk of experiencing homelessness or housing instability. Eligible renters whose landlords choose not to participate in the program will be provided financial assistance directly. Next slide, please. For more information or to apply for the COVID-19 relief as a landlord or a tenant, you may contact the California Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency by phone or visit them at their website. Next slide, please. The American Rescue Plan, which is being administered by the United States Treasury, was created to build an equitable economic recovery by providing working families a $1,400 check per person. This is better known as a stimulus check. It was created with the intention of helping Americans stay in their homes by providing emergency aid to cover back rent and bills, and help struggling homeowners catch up with their mortgage payments and utility costs through the Homeowners Assistance Fund. It is set to provide additional funding for families and individuals who are recovering from or at risk of homelessness. Next slide. The California Housing Finance Agency, or CalHFA, was administered by the California Mortgage Relief Fund, which was established to mitigate financial hardships after January 21, 2020, and associated with the coronavirus pandemic by providing funds to eligible property owners. Next slide, please. The goal was to prevent homeowners from mortgage. Hello?
Yeah, we still got you, Ani. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So the goal of the California Mortgage Relief Fund was to prevent homeowners from mortgage delinquencies and defaults, foreclosures, loss of utilities, or home energy services, and displacements of homeowners experiencing financial hardship. Next slide, please. For more information or to apply for the California Mortgage Relief Fund, you may contact the California Housing Finance Agency at their phone number or visit their website. Next slide. And if you have any questions or need assistance with foreclosure prevention, rent stabilization, or regarding the information presented today, you may contact the Department of Consumer and Business Affairs at our general line or by visiting our website. This concludes our presentation, and we will now answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to Sam and to Ani for your presentation. Once again, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to type them now in the chat box. We have a few questions, and the first one that we have so far is asking if there are any specific mortgage relief programs for properties in Van Nuys. So Van Nuys being part of the city of Los Angeles. So are there any city of Los Angeles specific mortgage relief programs, Sam?
Okay, thank you for that question. So portions, well, because Van Nuys does fall in with the city of Los Angeles, the city of Los Angeles did establish a mortgage relief program. To my understanding, the funds have actually currently run out. Now, if you are a landlord renting a property, you still may qualify for the California Rent Relief Program, as mentioned in the presentation before. Outside of that, if the funds do either return, It's recommended that you dial 311 to the city of, if you are in the city of Los Angeles, excuse me, and find out if there are any intentions for that fund to be replenished.
Okay, thank you, Sam. The next question is a little bit longer. I'll try to summarize it a little bit. But the question was, how can we automatically refund the money above the amount owed in a sale to the foreclosed owner? And then there was concern about the IRS being notified about everyone there. So hopefully you can help answer that question, Sam.
Okay, yeah, sure. So typically when a property, I'm guessing that they're talking about, the person who answered the question is talking about a foreclosure auction and the idea of excess proceeds, meaning if a property is sold or the minimum bid is, for example, $100,000 and somebody bids eventually goes up to $150,000. And that money is sent over essentially to a trustee. And a trustee is going to require that all potential claimants to that money submit a form to their office to claim that money. How to avoid that, I don't necessarily know the answer to that. I think that's really the law and how it functions. I really hope that answers the question. But I think I might need to have more information to sort of gauge that. It sounds like a pretty specific question.
Sure. And just a reminder to everyone that if you do have a specific question that perhaps you don't want to ask here as part of the webinar, then you can reach us by email at homehelp@dcba.lacounty.gov. I'll go ahead and type that in the chat box after we get to our next question. So our next question is asking, I think it touches on kind of their personal situation a little bit, but the question is 18 years worth of forbearance the only option? So I think 18 years back to the previous program of HAMP, because the question asks, some homeowners owe more than the value of their properties. Will there be a program like HAMP that will take over? So anything we can add to that, Sam?
Well, the idea of is I think the 18-year forbearance. I mean, it's tough to discuss. It comes down to, I believe, a financial discussion between everybody who's involved. What it takes to forbear. I mean, what financial impact does an 18-year forbearance really have on a property owner? Does it make, like we had mentioned before, everybody's individual situation is different. Does that long of a forbearance, eventually the money gonna have to be paid back? We don't see anything like HAMP coming back now. I personally have not heard of any programs that the government is intending to put out to sort of provide relief like HAMP had done. But I mean, again, everything is an individual situation. It really comes down to a person's own financial situation and their financial goals. So like Kevin had mentioned, if you have a question, reach out to us directly. It's easier to get down to the nitty gritty with somebody's with more details than just a general blanket.
Thank you, Sam. And there was a follow-up to that question, or at least a clarification, that they were referring to 18 months of forbearance, not 18 years. So I think everything else still applies there.
Oh, I see. Okay. So the 18-month forbearance. So the rule was with forbearance requests, they were limited with the Fannie and Freddie. There's no limitation on when a person can request their initial forbearance. There are other dates and things that come into play when it comes to when you experience your financial hardship, when you actually requested your initial forbearance. If you had ever done that, who owns the loan? There's sort of a lot of that stuff kind of going on right now. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have not set a deadline on when you can request that initial forbearance. But again, reach out to our office directly. Let us talk to you. Let us go through it, and let's figure out exactly what you're owed or offered, and what possibilities you have in front of you.
Okay, great. We have a couple of questions here that touch on some of the specifics of the mortgage relief programs that are out there. So I think we'll do our best to answer some of these questions. So one question asked, stated that they own their house, they're not a renter, so therefore do they apply, and I believe this refers to the California program, do they apply as a renter or a landlord?
Well, I guess it would come down to, I mean, I understand they own the property, which if they're a landlord, all landlords own the property, but who would really occupy it? Now, if they own the property and the tenant has been unable to pay the rent, they together in tandem, they would have to reach out to the California Rent Relief Program and together, sort of apply for those funds to make sure that they can, get the rent paid up. But again, it would take both parties to do that. I hope that answers it without any.
Right, and I think perhaps another way to look at it, and maybe I misread it at first, is that they own their home, but they don't rent it out. So they are neither a renter or a landlord. I think maybe they're just a single family homeowner. So they're asking perhaps if they are eligible for some of these programs.
Well, so if they own the home and if they own it outright and there's no outstanding debt, then I don't believe they would qualify for any sort of assistance. Now, if there is a mortgage against the property and they own it, they live in it, the LA County Mortgage Relief Program that's currently being administered through the Neighborhood Housing Services of Los Angeles may be able to help them. The contact information for them is actually listed right there. 888-895-2647. I would highly recommend that you actually go through their website. It's a much smoother process. You don't have to wait on the phone either. But yeah, that would be it.
Okay, there are a couple of questions here in regards to utility assistance for homeowners. So one question asks, or one states that they have included their utilities along with the rent charged as a flat rate. So therefore, is there any utility assistance as a homeowner? And secondly, someone asks, what documentation is required to qualify for the utility assistance?
So from what I'm hearing right now, it sounds like the landlord's interested in probably recovering some sort of rent that maybe the utilities were included in there. That would actually be up to the financial assistance provider. If they're looking to, provide you with assistance based on the rent that you're charging your tenant, whether that includes utilities or not, how that's dispersed is going to really be up to them. I couldn't tell you outside of that. I don't believe there's sort of any other recovery for something like that.
Okay. This question again regards the forbearance. So they are asking, what type of documents will lenders typically ask from the homeowners to provide in order to proceed with the forbearance process?
So the original forbearance agreement between the federally backed loans was essentially just a phone call. You had to call your lender and let them know, I've been negatively affected by the coronavirus and I need help. They went through a process and eventually they came to the idea that we're going to put you on a forbearance for the time being. Now, loans that are not backed by the federal government require some sort of additional proof, right? It could be something, it could be bank statements, it could be pay stubs, it could be a slip from your job letting them know that you've been laid off. It all depends on the type of loan. Going back to what, and I hate to say it because it sounds like a broken record, but property owners, you need to call a valid agency. Speak with us, speak with the HUD certified agency. Let us look at your individual situation. Let us help you look at the options available with your lender, and let's figure out what's required. There's no blanket statement for every loan that secures a property. You have to ask. So, the level of proof when it comes to approving a forbearance can vary greatly.
Okay, and thank you for all these questions, everybody. Again, you can continue to add questions to the chat. So someone mentions a little bit about their personal situation, but they're wondering if they might qualify for some of these mortgage relief programs. It looks like the situation that they're referring to is with some people who are retired and rent out some of the rooms in their home to some of their family members. Would they possibly qualify, and they're behind on their payments due to COVID situations? Would you expect that they would qualify for mortgage relief in their situation?
No, I understand the question. It's sort of difficult to answer because I don't necessarily know the exact, I guess you could say, agreement that both parties have, the landlord and the tenant, despite the relationship outside of that agreement. If they can, I imagine if they can confirm that they're bona fide tenants, meaning they pay market rate and maybe they were negatively affected by the coronavirus or any other requirement that would legitimize them as tenants. I don't see a reason, personally, I don't see a reason why they would be denied for that sort of mortgage relief. But again, applying for it is probably going to be the best first step before anybody, just go for it. Doesn't hurt to try.
Okay, the next question is probably one that a lot of landlords are facing right now. So this person is currently in a forbearance plan that is set to expire next month. Their landlord, they're not receiving enough money from their tenants in order to cover the mortgage payment. So is there any help out there for landlords to get the help to pay those mortgages or their mortgage?
So what I think I heard you say was there's a property owner who rents, their property, and their tenants, they're unable to, or they fail to meet the obligations of their monthly rent payments, right? The California Rent Relief Program does address that situation. In addition, if the property is 1 to 4 units and the property owner does reside in one of those units, they could potentially apply for the LA County Mortgage Relief Fund. So yes, those opportunities are out there.
Okay, someone was asking a question regarding the fact that they have already applied for the mortgage relief program. Do we know when funds will be dispersed if they've been approved? Do we have any insight on that?
I don't have any specific insight on that. I think that's going to be probably best addressed with the counseling agency that they were assigned to. It could be the LA NHS. It could be a couple of different HUD certified agencies. But that question is going to be best addressed with the counselor that they were assigned to.
Yeah, and it looks like we have a similar question from someone else's circumstance where they applied with NHS and HPP. They have their information. And I guess they stated that they are waiting on funds from the city. So again, asking if we know when those funds are going to be released.
Yeah, especially from the, I mean, especially from the city, we really don't have any information on the timeline of when those funds will be released. I would recommend the person that you initially submitted your application to, or the documents that you submitted, reach out to them and let them know that you have some questions and see if you can get some answers. It's not something that I think we would be able to positively address.
Okay, Sam, thank you so much for your questions, and thank you to all of our participants for our questions. I believe that we got all of them. Oh, one snuck in right here, one last one, and then I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up after this, Sam. And this is a question about DCBA's Foreclosure Prevention Unit. Does your agency provide help on filling out the form for modifications of loans? And once you answer that, then you can go ahead and wrap up the presentation, Sam.
Okay, sure. Let me go ahead and Ani, give that a shot.
I think that Ani is no longer in the meeting. So if you have that information.
Yeah. Oh, okay. No worries. So in fact, our department has been set up to do this for several years. We do have individuals who are maybe unfamiliar with the process, and that's really what we're here for. Our department can help a person fill out the forms. We will not do it for you, but we will help make sure that whatever the document is asking for, that we direct you in the right, in the right direction, or that we put you in the right direction to make sure that you fill it out correctly. And we've had people in our department do this for almost 10 years, and we have not necessarily just the experience, but we know how to fill these forms out in a way that when they're done correctly, that there's no question when the lender receives them. I would strongly recommend, if you do have questions about your loan, or you're looking to come at or explore foreclosure prevention alternatives, give us a call. There's nothing more that I can stress besides call us, let us talk to you about your individual situation, and let's see what we can come up with. It may not be the option that you're looking for, because nobody can provide absolute assurance that they can prevent foreclosure, but at least get the education and the understanding of the situation you're in and what it would take moving forward with whatever it is that you're looking to accomplish.
Okay, Sam. So I think that concludes all of our questions for the day. Thank you, everyone who asked a question. And again, if you have something that you wanted to follow up with, if you have something that's a little bit private, or you want to get into details of your specific situation, then please email us at homehelp@dcba.lacounty.gov. And you can find a recording of this presentation at dcba.lacounty.gov or on our department's YouTube page. Sam, do you have anything that you'd like to wrap up with?
No, just thank you everybody for attending. Again, I encourage you to, reach out to us if you have questions, and even pass on our information to anybody that you think might be concerned with, the idea of foreclosure or losing their property, and enjoy the rest of your week.